Hello, if you are watching, and welcome back to another conversation of Power of the Parent in Conversation with. Today, I am joined by Kirsten, who is the founder of the Shine On Tribe. I am so thrilled to chat to you, and it feels like weird when you're talking to somebody and at a camera as well, doesn't it, sometimes? But something that has been close to my heart in terms of what I've seen a lot of clients going through and conversations that I'm having with employers at the moment is how can we better support different versions of parenthood so that we don't make sometimes damaging assumptions about traditional family setups being the case for everybody, and lots of things are often packed with assumptions. And I recently went out to my Instagram community and said, would anybody like to come and share their stories and their experiences? And Kirsten very kindly replied. And we are going to be talking today in particular about being a single, solo or co-parent. Kirsten is a single parent and has been since 2016. Your story starts before that, well, way before that, but your parent story starts before that, doesn't it? And your experiences of being in the workplace, and kind of what happened there, particularly when I know you were in an HR function, but probably not what we would describe as best practice is what you were met with. So could we start there? If we go back to that return to work experience, I don't want to take you to a really dark place, but just for a bit of context,
I'm over it now.
just for a bit of context setting, it would be great to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I worked in HR. I've recently finished my HR career after 20 years, actually. So but when I'd started a new job and I just got married, basically. And I was told on day one of my new role that it was something along the lines of, I hope you don't have a family planned because you can't do this sort of job part-time, something along those lines. So it was sort of made very clear to me from day one that coming into this role as a newly married person, that if I was going to have children, my job probably wouldn't be there afterwards. And actually that bore out to be fact, because when I had my son and I did start to talk about my return, my role had been changed, which was immediately kind of illegal, by a senior HR person, and a female senior HR person as well, which always sort of makes it a little bit more galling. And it ended up that I took redundancy because I actually almost had to force that conversation, because it was just like, well, you're coming back to this, almost you should be grateful for that. I didn't want to go back full time. I wanted to have a similar role, and I wanted to explore how I could manage that as a working mum, and I just wasn't able to do that. So I ended up exiting the workforce because of that, actually, and going self-employed with Shine.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I say amazing. I don't.
It's amazing now.
Amazing in some ways, like jaw-dropping in others. Amazingly jaw-dropping in some. And I think that experience, it doesn't ever leave you, and you do kind of move through it, don't you? But you can't help but let it inform your reason for being, why you might then go on and set up your own business, for example. I'm not a massive fan of everything happens for a reason, because I have a huge issue with, I could tell you like immediately 5 things that I can find no reason for. But some things do happen for a reason, let's say. And obviously that's something that's led you to be able to craft a career that has blended beautifully with, maybe not easily, but has definitely blended with family life for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it was kind of my only option, really. I said I went self-employed with Shine. First of all, I went self-employed as an HR consultant, and I kind of didn't, it was either do that or go and find some other way of being self-employed, or some part-time job, which was a massive step down in salary. I wouldn't be utilizing the skills that I'd kind of worked really hard to gain, and the qualifications that I'd worked really hard to gain. I could find kind of some sort of job that would fit around my child, but there was no real sort of like middle ground, or sort of ability to say, well, actually, yeah, you can come and do this, you can come and do this type of project work within the bit, and it was a largish business, so it possibly could have been fitted in, but it was just that mindset of, no, that's not happening. So I've got to this place where I've had to just work something around what my needs are and what my family's needs are, and that's like changed dramatically over time as well, really.
Well, let's focus on that for a second, if we count on more than a second. So 2016 was the year that you became a single parent.
Yes.
And I suppose, so I kind of mentioned it really in the intro, a lot of what I have come across and have been around over the last couple of years has been a lot of clients needing to work through what being a single or a solo or a co-parent has meant in the workplace for them. And it's often come up because they have been faced with a lot of assumptions, and everything from you're always going to be really time poor to you're even less ambitious, and you've just got, you're going through a really traumatic time personally. So how could you possibly ever want to consider a career? Like, just very, very unhelpful narratives that are almost like treating shock horror people as this homogenous group, which clearly we're not. And I think that combination of people wanting to express who they are but also honor their boundaries, I think I often see is quite difficult for a lot of people that I work with. I want to let somebody know that this is what I'm going through. I want to talk to my line manager about it, but actually it's very difficult because I feel like I'm going to get branded in a certain way. Is that something that you've ever had to, whether it's been clients or friends or family members, is that something that you've found that you've had to work through, or kind of listening to that, is there anything that you would offer up to people as advice?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I'm a co-parent, so I do have some sort of I don't know if it's more flexibility really, but so I mean, for a start, I have to, I guess I don't have to, but my son's dad has a very rigid job where he's not able to have much flexibility, so therefore it's kind of fallen to me to flex around the demands of that, and so therefore build my business around that kind of thing. As an HR person, as HR consultant, I did find really frequently that you can almost see people's sort of perspective on you change when you say you're a single parent or you're a co-parent, because they think, oh, does that mean she's always going to be really unreliable and she's not going to be able to complete work, and actually I think the opposite is sometimes true of single and co-parents, because you almost have so much to prove that you will, I worked into the night, for years in my HR business to make sure that client work was done, to make sure that things were delivered on time. I would work around a sick child all the time, as I know a lot of parents have to anyway, but it almost makes you kind of more determined to not be unreliable and to not be, letting people down. And actually, I'm pretty certain that I lost a couple of big potential clients because they kind of were just like, oh, I just don't know that that's going to really work, and I would kind of liken it to people being discriminatory against people with mental health issues, because actually that situation could happen to you at any point in your life. That might happen to the person that's sitting there judging you for being a single or co-parent, and and in the same way that you might say, well, oh, I can't take this person on because they've got mental health issues. Well, anyone can have mental health issues at any time. It's such a kind of narrow way of looking at things. And yeah, that was really my experience. I've found that people are really definitely I had clients say, we can't take her on because she's a single parent, and I just look at them and go, wait for the penny to drop, and realizing who they're talking to. And it's like, well, on what planet does that mean that they're actually going to be less reliable? It's just, there's no proof or fact or anything, but any evidence or anything behind it.
That seems to be one of the most consistent assumptions, and one of the most unhelpful narratives. I'm struggling to use words that aren't all the swears.
Yeah, I know how you feel. I was just doing the same thing as I was thinking it through.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're okay to swear because I'm not going to click that this is the children. It's the biggest load of bullshit that is out there. That there's this idea, like I'm not a single parent. I'm married and I have a husband here, not here, not sat here. So I can't speak from immediate first-hand experience, but my mum was a single parent, and I think I was probably 6 or 7, I think I was, when my parents divorced. And like my mum worked 2 jobs. At one point, I think she had 3. She was a nurse in general practice. She also then worked at a golf club at the weekend, like waiting on. And I remember going with her actually a couple of times. We would go to my grandparents on a weekend, and my dad would have us on a Saturday night. But when sometimes, if we were with mum on a weekend, we would go with her. And I remember helping roll cutlery into serviettes and things like it was like the days of that's how you got past cutlery in a golf. And there was absolutely no way that she was ever going to let us go without anything, that she wanted us to be the kids that couldn't go on the school trip or things like that. And we did have family around that helped. We had grandparents, aunties and uncles. They were all, as soon as my parents were divorcing, they all kind of got together on both sides and were like, right, we've got to make sure that our lines of communication stay brilliant. And it was, there's lots of things that people involved didn't do, in hindsight, didn't do brilliantly, but there were lots of things that they did really, really well. And I definitely hit the jackpot with a family that wanted to make sure that me and my sister were very much put first and at the forefront of everybody's decision making.
Amazing.
But when I look at my mum's work ethic and she was always like that. It wasn't just because she was a single parent, but I definitely know that drove her so much more, because so much of it just fell on her shoulders. It almost was, it wasn't quite 100%, but it wasn't far off.
There's no alternative, basically. That's the sort of thing. And I'm not saying that people who are in marriages are unreliable, but it's like there's nothing to suggest that like there's any difference. It's just kind of like you say, total bullshit come out of nowhere.
Well, it's similar to I find anyway, it is similar to the idea that when you become a parent, you're going to be less ambitious or less whatever, like you're not going to do such a good job in the workplace because you've now got children to look after. I hear so many times from people that probably shouldn't say it out loud, like they shouldn't have it as an inside thought either, but that you kind of think, well, but why? Like what is there to suggest that is going to be the case? There isn't why is it that we assume that people without children are going to be absolute model employees? Because let me tell you, I've worked with some people who don't have children or any sort of caring responsibilities, not even for an animal or a hamster of some description, goldfish, and they're some of the most shocking people I've ever worked with. So why is it that we kind of use this trigger point almost of you dare to procreate and then you go down in people's estimations for your career? Because actually most people that I've ever worked with, it goes the other way. And or it doesn't change all that much. What does change is our logistics, the narrative that we face, the fact that actually there's a lot more that we do have to take into account because we have got caring responsibilities, but that doesn't make it like worse. So from being a single or co-parent perspective, is there anything that was particularly, or even now, that you find particularly helpful from either acts of support from friends or family or perhaps clients that you've worked with that you would say sort of stand out, that we may be able to sort of pass on to perhaps a line manager if they were watching this and they're wondering, what the hell do I say to people, or what shouldn't I be saying to people? Is there anything kind of in that arena you'd suggest?
I think if I think of the most helpful clients, particularly, they would be flexible to the point of, okay, you've got your child ill at home today. Can you still do the meeting? Or, would it be helpful if it was online? That kind of thing. And just having that flexibility and that knowledge that, and I think this about the amount of employers that I've worked with, that they, just realizing that if somebody's at home, even if they have got a sick child, quite often that they still do get a lot done. And just having that flexibility, not making the assumption that, well, if you're at home, you can't possibly be doing things, or, if you've got the school run to do, you can't possibly be getting anything done. It's just such an outdated narrative, and people work really, really differently. So I think it's really about the individual employee. If they say, well, actually, I don't want to work from home because I can't get anything done, well, then maybe, you don't go with that. But actually, if they're saying to you, you know what, actually, it's easy for me to work from home anyway, I'm going to get loads more done. And once they're in bed, I can crack on and do 3 or 4 hours then. So it's just having that sort of like flexibility and not thinking, well, I've got to apply the same rules to everybody, because people are individuals. And I think it's another outdated kind of narrative. It's traditional management, isn't it? It's like, people have to come in and they have to do this and we have to treat them all the same, and it's by the hour. Manage people by the results that they're getting you and support them, not just kind of thinking, well, I can't let that person work from home because I've not let that one, and that sort of thing. Just, apply a bit of kind of common sense, a bit of flexibility, and a bit of sort of understanding. Maybe if you don't have children, it's hard to understand that. Maybe if you're not the main carer for your children, it's hard to understand that. But actually, it is your job as a manager to get to know that person, understand what their challenges are, make them, able to share that with you without fear, and really, support them to know that you can bring the best out of them if you give them that support.
I really love that. I think that keeping front and center, it is about helping people bring out the best in them and being their kind of favorite versions of themselves. I think something that I've taken away from what you've just shared there is that constant reminder that actually you don't need to know all the answers, but you do need to be curious about your people. So it isn't going to be a one size fits all. It's not like keeping a tally of, well, they've worked from home twice this week and therefore I can't let them a third because this person over here hasn't done that, because everybody's going to be so just, I don't know what, like there's a fluidity we should really be striving for a level of fluidity, and if we drive that with having to have everything consistent, and I think this is sometimes where it gets completely butchered as a concept, this sort of fairness and equity. That isn't about saying everybody needs exactly the same thing, is it? I suppose we all would love, one thing that is consistent is we want an environment where we can all thrive, but actually the way in which that comes about is going to be wildly different for each of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to what you said at the beginning about the policy, everything being really policy driven. It's like you're allowed to work from home 3 days a week, or you're allowed to work from home 2 days a week, or you can't possibly do it a third day. Well, really, what's the impact of that on the business? Like when I was working with clients, for me, things are always about impact. If there's no impact to something, it's completely pointless saying, no, you can't do it, because all you're doing is sort of building that wall between you and your employees. And that's not helpful.
No, absolutely. Looking ahead and like the next steps for your journey, because you're kind of going through another transition period at the moment, aren't you?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the realities of being that kind of establishing a business and figuring out being a co-parent and kind of what dynamics are coming into play for you at the minute?
Yeah, so I mean, well, there's lots and lots of things. So I've set up a new business and it's doing coaching, online training and retreats. The idea behind online training is to try and build something that I don't always have to be in the room for, because you kind of get to that point where you can't physically be everywhere. There's been a couple of issues around the sort of how the co-parenting works, because some of my events are at weekends and things like that. So that's kind of a little bit of a new challenge to navigate, but I think we're getting there because we do have a relatively positive relationship most of the time. But the other thing is, there has been, the last time I set up a business, I was married and somebody else was paying the mortgage. And so that's a huge thing. I'm sort of like, time is ticking. My savings account is kind of dipping. And actually, even in recent months, every so often I kind of assess, well, actually, do I need to take on a bit of part-time work, which obviously brings in that whole entire challenge again of what part-time work is there out there. Is there any? There isn't really HR part-time work. Is there is there anything that I can do that would kind of supplement things while I get this business off the ground? And so that's another kind of logistical issue. And I'm coming back into those same challenges that I was facing nearly 10 years ago of, am I going to be able to fit into a workplace again? Am I employable anymore? Are there people out there that will say, yeah, actually we need somebody 2 days a week for 6 months and that fits us great, and my thought is it's unlikely. That doesn't happen very often, and obviously there's all of us snapping at those roles anyway. So yeah, those are a few of them.
I think that's something that's really important. Again, like if I reflect on what you're sharing there, I think one of the big things that keeps coming out with these conversations that I'm having is particularly a reminder for organizations and line managers that the support isn't a one-hit wonder. So and what support you need changes. So at the very beginning, for example, and I was chatting with a couple of different people last week, it was very much, they were in the early stages of co-parenting and separating houses and all that kind of thing. So what they needed from their employer then versus what they might need in a year's time could be something quite different. And then you've obviously, we're talking years worth of change for you here, that what you needed in 2016 is going to be very different to what you need now. And I know that you're your own business, but the same goes, doesn't it? It's you've got to be aware of my support needs and requirements. Don't stop just because I've had however many years practice at being a co-parent now. Actually, things get brought up and things change, and as your relationship with your child's dad changes and all of those things that come to fruition, that seems to be quite a consistent, whether it's to do with supporting single or solo or co-parents, whether it's at any stage of being a parent, actually, or anything you might come up against. That seems to be the thing that we don't often talk about, that support actually needs to be ongoing, and recognizing that it will need to be fluid and fluctuate because the needs change. It's almost like, right, can we neatly put something into a box for help, and this is what we have to do, and this is all we need to follow? And you will know from an HR background that would be just so brilliant and neat if we could package it up like that. But it's humans, not houseplants, isn't it? So it is never going to be packaged like that. So the sooner we get to that, the sooner we realise that that's never going to be the reality, the better.
I think people have this kind of fear. People always used to say to me as an HR consultant, what can I and can't I say? And it's like, well, how long is a piece of string? It depends what context, it depends what person, it depends what, what policies, everything. And like you say, people do want this neat little package, but actually it's, and their fear is that if they don't have a neat little package, they're saying the wrong thing. So probably another piece of advice I would give would be, don't be afraid. You've got people to support you. You'll have HR people, you'll have, workplace coaches and things like that. People like yourself, get that support and if you're not sure, find out, because actually you not acting and not doing anything ends up just making that situation worse. Which I think is, it's probably good advice for life, really. Just don't be scared. Find some advice, find some help, of how to navigate something if you're not sure.
I love that, and I think it's a brilliant place to neatly end on, because I think if you take nothing else away from this conversation, if you're listening to it, let it be that if you don't know, don't stay silent, go and ask for help, or I think sometimes even asking for that permission, saying, look, I've never navigated this with anybody before. If I say something that is massively foot in mouth, just tell me, and I'll, generally people will be apologetic, and we want to learn from it, don't we? But definitely holding back you're running, I think, a much greater risk often, which I know sounds counterintuitive for a lot of people, but the things that I've seen go horrifically wrong have been really poor communication as opposed to saying the wrong thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Kirsten, for talking to me.
Very welcome.
Do you want to just share a little bit about, like, where can we come and find out about what you're up to? What are the best places to come and find out about Shine On Tribe and how to get in contact?
So Instagram, I'm at Shine On Tribe. LinkedIn, you can find me Kirsten Smith. Or Shine Coaching, Training and Retreats is my business page. Facebook, I am on there. There's a little bit happening over there as well. So yeah, always happy to chat to people and talk more about what I'm doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.